Hey, this is Doug Wilkerson with Central Christian Center here at Joplin, Missouri, and Saturday Night Live, Life Recovery Ministry, um, here also with the church here at Joplin. Thanks for tuning in to be with us today. Um, I I got an interesting, of course, I think I say that almost every time, but I think I got a little interesting story for you today. I'm going to be talking about perception. Um, Perception, and then I got this story to kind of relate to perception, and the rest of the title is The Lesson That a Tattooed, Body Pierced Young Lady Taught Me About God's Blessing. Um, anyway, hopefully, the information and the story will be helpful and a blessing to you. My total desire is to try to help people, and I believe offering the truth, my truth, which hopefully lines up with the truth, uh, can help people uh, see things, be able to recognize things that's helpful to their lives. Hopefully, it is. And if something I say is helpful, let me know. How about that? I know that's maybe self-serving a little bit, but oftentimes I wonder. I believe that there's a lot of people that do watch that never respond, and I am going out on 5 different platforms, and different ones comment on different platforms. And anyway, and even if you don't, that's okay. My real desire is to try to help you to grow spiritually, to develop uh, in a mature way, to be able to handle life better because life is messy and it's a challenge. And I just want to give you what I think God gives me to share, and hopefully it's beneficial to you. So, perception today. It's a big topic. I anyway, I'm just going to touch on it and give you this story. So hopefully I can do that in just a few minutes. So here we go. Um, Perception. I'll give you a couple of definitions here. Perception. It's a noun. The ability to see, to hear, or become aware of something through the senses. Okay. Another another definition I found. It says from Latin precepto, a gathering and a gathering, comma receiving, uh, is the organization, identification, and interpretation of sensory information in order to uh, represent and understand the present information and environment. Okay, so that's kind of what perception is. But the fact of it is, oftentimes we determine how we're going to perceive things. And in fact, I don't have this in the information, but we take in so much information that um, God has made our brain to work in such a way that we delete um, millions of bits of information because we can only process like 50 um, bits of information per second. So we delete way more than we're able to process. So anyway, our perception and our brain, we tell our brain what it is that we want to be aware of. And of course, biologically, our amygdala is set to try to recognize threats. And so that's one of the things that we're automatically wired for, is to try to recognize threats to try to keep us safe. Let's go on. Um, Okay, my interpretation of perception is I kind of maybe already did, it's not just what we see, but it's how we see, it's how we look at it. And that's one of the things I want to try to talk about here a little bit is challenging ourselves to try to see things in a different way, which alters our perspective. They say our brain, we have two hemispheres. One hemisphere, they see the same picture, but it's different. And how it's different is because our right brain starts with details and develops the picture, mental picture. Our left brain does that. Our right brain starts with a wide picture, okay, and then fills in the field with the information. So you have dual representations to help you to get a better concept of what's going on. Just something that automatically works for us. So here we are. We're talking about perception, and my question is for you is, what's your perception? You know, we think that we see what we see. I have a saying that I work with people with. I say if I if I were willing to see what I see and know what I know, then and the trouble is we don't see all that we see. I already told you we delete most of the information that comes in. And if we were to operate on what we know, not what we don't know, we're always geared a lot of times just about what we don't know, and that would be good if we use that talent there for to help us to gain a greater perspective. And I've talked about using the observer perspective, and that means that you kind of step back and see things from a wider angle. These are all different little techniques about perception, okay? But you have to do that on purpose because oftentimes we get so focused and tight on our focus that we miss everything else. And of course, there's some people that don't get focused at all. And so they never ever hit the target, pretty much. So let's go on. Your perception. What's your perception? What we perceive is what we think is meaningful. We decide what it is that's important to us. So what we see is our perception. I used to share a message entitled, your trash is somebody else's treasure. Have you ever noticed that sometimes what you throw away, other people find important? Um, you know, um, in dealing with properties, oftentimes what people said that was no good, uh, I could look at and know, looking through the problems, you could see what needed to be done. And even though, yeah, emotionally it looks like a terrible thing, but if you could get through the emotional effect of the badness, um, you see what was there. I don't know how many properties people said, "Oh, what you ought to do is just bulldoze that." Uh, I never have, never, and I don't know that I ever will. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. But I imagine there's a time for everything. But perception, being able to see. And I may also use that same talent and skills with working with people because some people only see the bad things in people, and I know that people are much more than how they act. Okay, their doings. I know they've got a being and they're a living being that is valuable. If I don't get moving, I'm not going to get all this done in my time allotment. Uh, so I used to have the message about trash and treasure. Oftentimes we think ourselves as trash, and God knows that treasure that's in us. And what's in us is what He's put in us, and they're in us, and can never be that can never be trash. He finds it valuable. we need to recognize that and recognize the value also, not only in ourselves but in others. I um, I I used to have this old way of thinking um, about, I can only see things the way they are, and you're locked in with that first perception. I've dealt with people that you knew, particularly in my earlier years, bosses, that I knew that I needed to, because how can I say this? I want to say this in a nice way if I can. How can I say that? I knew that these bosses, that I needed to get the right information to them before anybody else got the wrong information to them, because when they got the wrong information, then they were mentally set in the wrong direction. And we can, but if I could get to them beforehand and at least let them be aware and help them to know what was going on, they had the capacity to recognize the wrong information. How about that? I tried to make that as nice as possible. So I would struggle with in my earlier years that it had to be the way that I saw it. But the fact of it is, I have learned, even though I still struggle from time to time, I have learned that I have to be able to get a broader picture and remember that there's more here that's unseen than I can see. Okay, there's more in everything that in the unseen than you can see. Einstein said something along that line. So anyway, and so I would get stuck, and sometimes I still get stuck. I still struggle with that, but hopefully I'm better than I used to be. Not as good as I'm going to be, but better than what I used to be. So the um, sometimes different ones I have in the past, but different ones would say things like, "Why does this always happen to me? How come I'm the one that that always gets dumped on? Why? How? Uh, when can I ever catch a break?" Things like that. Have you ever said some of that stuff? Certainly, all of us have one time or another, and and that's because we're looking at it from the victim mindset and we're locked in. And if that's the way you see the world, then everything that comes your way, you see it that way. And so that is our perception. Okay. And what I'm talking about, I want you to be able to recognize your perception. Hopefully, you can see that you have some of that perception, and that you can change it. I remember a man that I used to work with many years ago. Man, he was just going. His whole entire life was from one. He went from one problem to another and another, and I would try to help him, and he'd get so frustrated with his life, he would just flat sabotage himself. He was raised in a very abusive, harsh home life, and so he just lived this life framed with one tragedy after another. And it's sad. And every time I thought we was making progress, he'd blow out on me. He would erupt, and then we'd be disconnected for a while. So anyway, that's a whole nother story. Um, so what's your perception? Okay, how do you see things? Um, and Henry Ford said this. I like this. He said that whether you think you can or you think you can't, either way, you are right. So whatever you're thinking, You determine your destiny. Think about it. You get to choose. Kind of reminds me of Deuteronomy 30:19. Choose you this day who you'll serve, life or death, blessing or cursing. Proverbs 23:7 says this is out of the New King James Bible, says, "For as a man thinks in his heart, so is he." Well, that just pretty much says it right out. You determine whatever you're thinking in your heart, whatever you've planted in your heart. That's the reason why the scripture tells us in Psalms that we need to guard our heart, our thinking process. That's the reason why in Romans 12:2 says, "Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." It's what you put in there that makes all the difference, which develops the perception that we're talking about. You create how you're going to see things. You can choose it. I'm not saying it's easy, it's hard, but it's doable. Okay. And it's a lifelong process. You never ever hit the golden circle and then you can just lay back and do nothing. That is fantasy. Okay. Have you heard this one? This statement, I've used it from time to time. I really like it. And it's when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Okay. Now, Dr. Wayne Dyer, many years ago, wrote a book focused right around that statement. And for a long time, I thought he was the creator of that statement. But then I found out that it is attributed to um, um, Einstein, excuse me, Albert Einstein, that he said it. And I just recently found that one because I found earlier in my research that Max Planck actually said it. Now, Einstein and Planck were contemporaries, and actually, Max Planck actually come up with the theory of quantum physics, and actually won a Nobel Prize in the 1900s, early 1900s, 1918 to be exact, and that he was talking about quantum entanglement and how things can happen, and that's where Einstein said that that was to him that was spookiness at a distance. So he never did really accept quantum physics and everything, even though he used quantum physics in some of his mathematics. But later since then, their researchers have found out that how quantum physics, that spookiness at a distance, as Einstein said, actually it has worked. They've done things from the Earth that were in satellites, and that might be something that some of you might be interested in. It's very interesting. So, how do you look at things? You know, sometimes you just have to make a choice that you want to look at things differently. Oftentimes, I have challenged people and challenged myself because I remember one of the first times I used this, I had a couple of guys working for me, and they said that there's no way to do what it was that I wanted done. I said, now come on, guys, think creatively. Think creatively. Sometimes I tell myself, think creatively. I challenge myself. Sometimes I have clerks at stores, and when I'm trying to get something done, whether I don't know the different particulars, but sometimes they say, well, it can't be done. And I say, now come on, think creatively. You have a creative solution about this. I know you do. And not all the time, but almost all the time, solutions come up because you get people to break their mold of thought, their rigid thoughts, and begin to think differently. Their perspective can change. your perspective can change. My perspective can change. So we just need to notice the advantages that we can have by altering our perspectives, because for every problem there are multiple answers. Okay, multiple answers. Sometimes we get locked into thinking there's only one way of doing things, but there's not. There's not. Uh, Oftentimes when I get in those situations, I back up and try to enlarge my perspective by asking myself a question: could there be another way of doing this? Is there something I'm not seeing? And there's been, how many times have you went looking for something and you couldn't find it, couldn't find it, and I know I've said, I know it's here, but I can't find it. So I would back up, slow down, and then look carefully, scan the area, and there it is. We just look right over things. How many times have you looked at things from a different position and it looks different? Okay. How many times have you looked at things in a different light level and it looks different? You can see things on a wall with more light than less light. Sometimes you look like you got spots on a wall with just a regular light, but if you get a flashlight on it and you shine a direct line, all the spots is gone, and so you know it has to do with lights and shadows. And so perspective, it's a way to think differently about things. I like learning science information, that peer-reviewed studies, how things work, because that, coupled with the spiritual truth, helps me, because it reinforces the truth that God has said, and science is confirming God's word. Like quantum physics, I think quantum physics is the story of God, and how to use faith. That quantum physics is one of the reasons why Einstein didn't like quantum physics, because it you had to accept something that you couldn't fully understand. But that's God when it comes right down to it. And that's tough sometimes, very tough sometimes. So let's get going. So here's the story. Okay, I've beat around the bush long enough, and the lesson that a tattooed, body-pierced young lady taught me about God's blessing, and actually, to be exact, about pronouncing God's blessing on me. Here goes the story. It was summertime. It was hot outside. It was in the evening, getting late. I went to check on a piece of property, and I pulled up there, and there was people there that I didn't know, that I thought that probably shouldn't be there. I'd gotten a phone call from a neighbor basically stating that there were people there that shouldn't be there, and that I needed to probably check on that, which that's what I was doing. And so when I got there, this lady came up to me, and she said that she was there trying to help this other person, and she was a nice lady, and we had to kind of work through this situation and trying to get all the facts together and see what was going on, and try to negotiate our way through this, where I try to have a win-win solution the best I can. And so we had this situation going on, and she was nice, and she had tattoos on her face, on her body. She was wearing a sleeveless shirt. She had tattoos on her arms and hands, and she was very animated when she talked. She moved around, And she had also told me, which helped me understand a little bit about all of her tattoos, was that she worked in the tattoo business. And so she was a tattoo artist. And so she, even at one point, raised her arms up high, and with the sleeveless shirt, I saw, this may sound really weird, but I saw her armpits, and she had big stars in her armpit. They were bluish stars. They had, I don't know, things in the middle of them. And I thought to myself, man, that to me, that would have had to have been painful. But she was nice, and we kind of went through everything, and so that kind of gives you a kind of idea where we're at. But then we kind of reached the end of the negotiation, and she was kind of helping this other person, and she was okay with what we came to, and she said, "God bless you." And there was something about her statement of "God bless me" that meant something to me, that changed me, that actually still to this day, anytime anybody anywhere says "God bless you," I decided that day that I was going to always receive those blessings, whether they know what they're doing or not. I decided God sent that blessing to me, and it was up to me to receive it. And so throughout my life, people would say that, and I just kind of, I didn't pay that much attention to it, and I'm sorry to say that, but that was my perception. And this day, this lady helped me. I got maybe a revelation, you might say, about God's blessing. And now, when somebody says, "God bless you," I say, "Thank you. I received that." I made it. I changed my perception, my perspective, and I established a habit of receiving that blessing. And every time, I'd say almost every time that somebody says that to me and I receive that, I feel, I don't, this may sound really strange, but I feel that kind of a spiritual tingling because I receive God's blessing. And that's a good thing for me. So I just want to say, listen, perspective, perception, being aware, being open, seeing. And if you can get anything from my story about when somebody says, "God bless you," or "good on you," or whatever they might say, I decided I was going to go ahead and take it. Why not? Hey, if somebody were to curse you or cuss you or damn you, oftentimes you kind of take some of that in. We don't have to. And that's that in my early years, that was very automatic taking it in. But you know what? I want to automatically take in God's blessing because I have a new perception. I have a new perspective. So, hopefully this is helpful to you today. May the Lord bless you, keep you. May his face shine upon you and give you his peace. God bless you. Till next time, take care of yourself.